One commodity not covered in the last presentation was uranium, so I'll give you a brief highlight on that as well. But just in summary, GoviEx was a company founded in 2007 by Govin Friedland, the son of Robert Friedland. It was a play. He was living in Beijing at the time, realized that the nuclear industry was going to be a growth industry and wanted to be part of that. So he acquired a series of licenses in Niger. Niger produces about 8% of the world's uranium, has since the 1970s. Currently has produced over 140,000 tons of uranium from that country. We took on a series of licenses, did a massive exploration program, about 650,000 meters, and put down a very large resource. We took that all the way to mine permitting in 2016. Then we acquired a number of other assets from Denison Mines, also in Africa, and really focused our portfolio there. So we were sitting with one of the largest resources in uranium in the global peer group. We have a massive exploration upside on all of our properties. But the key to us is actually 2 of our projects are already mine permitted. We don't need anything else from government to be able to start construction. We just need to put in place the financing structures required to get those developments going. So as I said, everything is in Africa. We like Africa. One of the benefits of Africa is that you can get things permitted very quickly. Niger took us 6 months. The equivalent in Canada is somewhere between 10 to 15 years to get a permit done. Why? Because the government in Niger, 60% of its exports every year is uranium. Its budget relies on those uranium exports and aid. And its 2 existing mines are due for closure in the next 3 to 5 years. It needs replacement feed to come through. The other nice thing is that the mining code in Niger hasn't changed for a really long time. It stayed very stable. Importantly, the tax code is included in the mining code. So when you get your mining permit, it's actually an act of government and cannot be changed from that point onwards other than to the better. So you've got a very stable government there as well. These are all mining jurisdictions. So we quite like operating in Africa. It is fairly safe from our point of view in the countries we're in, but more importantly, we've picked countries that are politically stable. On the energy market, really, I get slightly more than normal because it's not a commodity that most people talk about, but really, where are we? We had Fukushima in 2011. What has happened since then is that Japanese reactors were turned off. They were 16% of world demand. The Germans started closing their reactors. But what's happened since then really is a steady geopolitical shift. The Kyoto Agreement, the Paris Agreement have all underlined this issue that we've got to keep global temperatures down. And the reality is coming through that the only way you're going to achieve this is through nuclear generation. Germany has spent $450 billion on solar and wind. They currently have the same carbon emissions as they did 20 years ago. This has made no difference. In California, 1 reactor currently produces more clean energy than the whole wind fleet in California. So that shows you the strength of the reactor business. It's also some of the cheapest. So what you've seen now is a steady turnaround. You've got nuclear generation back to the same level it was pre-Fukushima. That is Chinese construction and Japanese restarts. You've got the fastest rate of reactor builds that we've had for the last 25 years. China is now set on a path of producing 8 new reactors a year between now and 2030 to ramp up from 4% of total generation to over 20% of total generation will be nuclear. Why can they do this? Because they have standardized construction. EDF indicated in the UK, if they standardize their reactor builds, they will cut their cost by 20 to 25%. What's happening in China is that, plus, as you can see the chart on the right, the reactor build rates have shrunk considerably as they're just repeating the same build over and over again. So strong growth coming through on reactor builds. Wherever you look, demand for power is rising. Doesn't matter who you're looking at, BP, IEA, this is Exxon. But what you're also seeing is an increasing realization within all of these that you need new reactors. The WNA came out with what they call the Harmony Program, which said how much energy do you need to come from the nuclear industry between now and 2050 if you want to stay below 2 degrees centigrade power increase. They came up with a number of a brand new 1,000 gigawatts of power had to come through. Well, the WNA would say that because they support the nuclear industry. However, the United Nations Energy Council did a completely independent review, which was the 6 largest power generating countries around the world, and asked them the same question. They came up with exactly the same answer. that 1,000 gigawatts of nuclear power has got to be built if you're going to stop world temperatures going by more than 2 degrees by 2050. That was important because the United Nations and the World Bank historically would not talk to the nuclear industry. So you're seeing a political shift coming through here as well, whereas a realization on a bigger scale that we need nuclear. Supply side, so we've got big demand growth going out. Supply side, effectively, the key issue that's really occurred here is the big producers. Cameco and Kazatomprom have taken control of the market. They've been pulling back production. Cameco shut down probably the best mine in the world, McArthur River, last year, indefinitely. They effectively said it's cheaper to buy our units in the market than actually produce it. So what they've done is taken the market and put it into supply-side deficit. This is fine for a while, but as we move forward, 20% of world production will close in the next 5 to 10 years. These are mines that have actually come to the end of their life. They've got nothing left to dig out. There's nothing to do with economics on these projects. That has to be replaced. Secondary side as well is in decline. Secondary side sales are driven by two things: government sales and enrichment sales coming through. There's underfeeding, which is where guys have got too much capacity. They're just producing units. That has been in decline as well, simply because the capacity constraints have been removed from there. You've had overfilling now coming from Japan. Secondary sales is dropping. The other problem you've got, massive contracting. While we had a bull run, that contracting's come off. Those contracts are about to unwind. Inventories in France, Europe, the US are in decline at the moment. They're dropping off as guys are using up their inventories. Cameco exacerbating that problem. Cameco are buying 18 million pounds of spot material in the market. The spot market is only 25 million pounds a year. So they're effectively hunting for inventory and pulling inventories out to meet their contractual requirements. The off-takers, the utilities, buy 80% of their material in the contract market. Over the next 2 years, those contracts unwind from the bull market and have to be refilled. When you spend $10 billion building a reactor and 3% of your power cost is fuel, you don't care where it comes from as long as you're filling up your inventories. This is the problem the utilities have got. So Cameco's benchmark is $50 contract. That's what they want to be able to restart their operations. And they're the ones out there buying in the market, trying to force it up to get to where they need to be, but holding the market in deficit at the same time. So our strategy is all about being in the position that when this price starts to rise, we can go into construction. We have 2 projects fully permitted that can do that. First one is in Niger. It's right next to the operations of Areva at Arlet and Akakan. All the infrastructure's there. It is flat, it's boring, it's brown. We have nobody near us. We're in the middle of the Sahara Desert. So we've taken this thing all the way to pre-feasibility study. We're currently running the final feasibility study on this. The target of that is at least a 10% production OPEX cost, 10% CAPEX cost. We're working our way through that at the moment. We're already talking to the debt guys. We've got a debt structure we're working on already. It's an ECA-backed coverage. The ECAs are more than happy to support the African countries. So that's coming out of North America, out of Africa. We started the offtake contracts, but at the current uranium price, not a lot of conversation going on there. But this, once we get there, will be backed by offtake contracts. We require that as well for the credit committee side to go forward. So this project's already going through all the stages it needs to go through to be able to, if the uranium price moves, 9 to 12 months, we can be constructing. 2 years, we're in production. One of the benefits I have to my peers, most of them only have one project and most of them don't have a permitted project at all. So we have a second permitted project. This is in Zambia. The first one is 21 years mine life. This year's 12. Very easy. Same all-in cost as Niger. It's a very low capital cost to get this project going. A lot of exploration upside. So, management team, I've been in the mining industry over 30 years. I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Russia, I've worked in Canada, South America. I've also been an equity analyst. The rest of my team, a lot of experience. On the board, Govin Friedland is the chairman. Benoit LaSalle is worth pointing out here. Benoit LaSalle founded Semafo. Semafo was one of the best forefront players into West Africa gold. He's also the chairman of the Canadian Africa Council, so he knows all the presidents in West Africa. Really helpful. David Cates is the CEO of Denison and UPC. UPC is an ETF. You want to play the uranium price only, you can play UPC or Yellowcake. Okay, we've got about 3 million of cash, we're okay. Major shareholders, I realize I'm trying to keep the time down here. This is really the chart I want to show you. GoviEx is massively undervalued relative to its peer group as a developer. But what I'll point out is that line that shows you what the producers get averaged out. There is a massive markup to become a producer, and GoviEx is probably almost the only one on the right-hand chart that's actually permitted and can get to the left-hand side. This is important because in the last cycle, the two best performing stocks were the two companies that built mines. Everybody else either was a producer or stayed a developer. Those two were Paladin and Energy Fuels. Paladin, it was a different cycle. They went to $130 a pound, went up 10,000%. The sector went up 2,000%. Energy Fuels went up 4,000%. The other point I'd make is that the biggest deals in the last cycle were all African transactions. Why? Because in Africa, you can own your own production. If you're buying a Canadian as a non-Canadian, you can only own 49%. So you can't control it. So that's why the Russians, the French, and the Chinese came buying in Africa in the last cycle to control supply. Large resource, permitted mines, we like the uranium market.